While making Sunset Boulevard, at the height of their powers and success, Billy Wilder broke up with his longtime screenwriting partner, Charles Brackett. Many people believed Brackett had been a moderating influence on Wilder's more impulsive and cynical sensibility. Now the world would learn if they were right.
Wilder seemed intent to prove them right, in fact. Now in complete charge of his destiny and with no one to tell him no, Wilder forged ahead to make Ace in the Hole, a tale of failed journalistic ethics that served up a blistering indictment of America's lust for spectacle. But America wasn't ready. The movie bombed, giving Billy Wilder his first taste of failure and changing the course of his career.
Welcome to the Filmographers podcast, the show where we study a director's entire career, one film at a time. This season, of course, we're giving the close-up to the one and only Billy Wilder. I'm Keir Graff, and with me, as always, is Michael Moreci, my ace in the hole. Mike, what's your one-sentence summary of Billy Wilder's 1951 movie, Ace in the Hole?
When an opportunistic journalist encounters a man trapped in a cave, he decides to transform the man's suffering, while playing God with his life, from a simple story into a spectacle.
Listeners, if you're trapped in a cave-in after searching for relics in a burial ground, don't give up hope. The Filmographers are coming to help.
So Leo, don't despair, while you are in the cave and hoping, we are up above you groping, and we soon will make an opening. Leo, we're closer, Leo, and soon you'll breathe fresh air, while you are in the devil's prison. Keep that spark of life a prison, we'll soon have you out of prison, Leo.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for Season 2 of the Filmographers podcast, our deep dive on the legendary writer-director Billy Wilder.
We're grateful so many of you have chosen to support us on Patreon, and we're showing our appreciation by releasing ad-free versions of our main episodes on that platform, plus monthly episodes that are only available to our paid supporters. This month, our special episode is about a movie that followed in the footsteps of Wilder's Ace in the Hole, Sidney Lumet's Network.
Ace in the Hole had been largely forgotten by 1976 when Lumet, working from a script by Paddy Chayefsky, offered a new generation a dark vision of the way the news media can exploit human tragedy for ratings and profit. We'll look at the way these films are similar and different, while exploring what had changed, or not, by the time of Network.
These Patreon exclusives are available to paid Patreon supporters at any level. If you've been thinking about upgrading your membership, now's the time. Just visit patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast to show your support.
Once again, that's patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. If you join at the $2 level, we'll send you a sticker. If you join at the $5 level, we'll send you a mug. Not ready to pay quite yet? Join for free, just so you see what we have to offer.
That's patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. Join today for the full Season 2 experience. Thank you so much for your support of the Filmographers podcast. We do it for you, and we couldn't do it without you.
Thank you to our newest Patreon supporters, Dolores, Tracy, Phil, Marnie, and Michael. Welcome to the Filmographers community.
Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett had always been a study in contrasts. Young and old, liberal and conservative, abrasive and genteel. But their creative friction had, over a dozen years, produced scripts for 7 successful movies for other directors, untold, uncredited contributions to other stories and screenplays, and a half-dozen films with Wilder as director and Brackett as producer. They were famous and very well paid. They had recently been the subject of an extensive profile in Life magazine, which used to be a pretty big deal.
Their breakup certainly didn't have anything to do with a lack of success, but it did have something to do with creative friction, or lack thereof. Years after their breakup, Wilder told James Linville, quote, "It's like a box of matches. You pick up the match and strike it against the box, and there's always fire. But then one day there's just one small corner of that abrasive paper left for you to strike the match on. It was not there anymore. The match wasn't striking."
Remember, that's Wilder's public version, and maybe their partnership had gone as far as it could go. But if he really did want that friction, It seems like an odd choice to stop working with one of the few writers who was truly a peer. It seems certain it also had something to do with Wilder's ambition. He was aware of his genius, and he wanted to be the only one calling the shots. In fall of 1948, he broke the news to Brackett, who took it hard, but honorably. After all, he was the gentleman.
The public announcement was made in the summer of 1949 while Sunset Boulevard was filming, and it was a shock. But Wilder and Brackett did not feud publicly, and the Paramount PR flacks came up with a story saying they were both paid too much to make just one film a year. They had to split up so they could make more films more profitably. But Brackett didn't last long at Paramount. When they asked him to produce 2 films a year and scrutinized his travel expenses, he quit in a huff and took his talents to 20th Century Fox, where he often wrote with Walter Reich, a former collaborator on Ninotchka. As biographer Ed Seekoff puts it, probably because he needed the ongoing verbal exchange with another loudmouthed Jew from Vienna. Brackett would go on to win an Oscar for Titanic and help Marilyn Monroe break out in Niagara. So his career was fine, and moving studios ensured Brackett and Wilder didn't have to have awkward encounters on the Paramount lot.
Wilder had moved on from Brackett, but he wasn't ready to go it alone. As we've noted, he had always worked best with a partner. Some say that, as a non-native English speaker, he didn't trust himself to be the sole writer. But his English, although heavily accented, was quite good. He had taught himself the language by listening to the radio, so he was actually pretty good with the idioms.
Yeah, baseball idioms in particular. He loved baseball.
Although he does occasionally have a tin ear, like the time in Sunset Boulevard when Gillis describes his agent playing golf and says he's, quote, making with the golf sticks. Oy vey. Personally, I suspect the real reason Wilder wanted a partner is that he didn't like to type. He preferred to pace the room, swinging his cane. Brackett had always transcribed their ideas by hand and done most of the dictation to their secretary, who actually typed the scripts.
And Wilder also needed a fresh source of ideas. He was a master at shaping stories and refining them with turns of phrase and memorable moments. But he wasn't always the one who came up with the original idea. Enter Walter Newman, all of 20 years old.
Billy Wilder had heard Walter Newman's dramatic work on his car radio, liked it, and asked for a meeting with the young writer. Talk about a big break. The starstruck Newman later remembered that Wilder never took off his Tyrolean hat and never stopped pacing. They started out by kicking around a few of Billy's ideas, including a story about a gangster who can't stop crying, so he sees a shrink, then plots to kill the shrink because he knows too much.
And a young David Chase was sitting in the corner furiously scribbling notes.
Just one of the many ways Wilder was ahead of his time. In a future episode, we'll learn he was even ahead of Grosse Pointe Blank. But the time was not yet right for a crying gangster picture. When Newman pitched his own idea about a man trapped in a cave-in and an ambitious reporter who manipulates the situation to sell the story, it warmed Wilder's dark heart. Here was a story he could do something with.
This conversation took place in October 1949, so Wilder had just hired on a new partner while still working with his old partner Brackett on Sunset Boulevard. Must have made for some awkward encounters in their writing bungalow.
Newman got to work developing the characters and the storyline, and over the next few months drafted a treatment. Near the very end of this process, he was joined by yet another writer, the playwright Lesser Samuels. I guess Greater Samuels wasn't available? I apologize. Author Ed Sykov has written about how the intimate, argumentative process of Brackett and Wilder had now been replaced by something more corporate, with Wilder, the undisputed boss, directing the work of his subordinates. And it's hard to argue with that version. Newman was probably thanking his lucky stars every day he stepped on the lot. And in early March 1950, Newman turned in a completed treatment titled The Human Interest Story.
Just like Double Indemnity, this one was based on a real-life incident that had first been screamed in sensational headlines. In 1925, Floyd Collins, the owner of Crystal Cave in Kentucky, was trapped by a landslide, and a journalist from the Louisville Courier-Journal helped organize the rescue attempt. while reporting it on the same time, naturally. The story gripped a nation hungry for sensation, and gawkers flocked to the site. A literal carnival sprang up to the site to keep the looky-loos entertained. But when the rescue attempt was unsuccessful and Collins died, the crowds departed, leaving trampled, littered ground in their wake. But lurid details continued to trickle out. After some of the supplies meant for Collins were found hidden in the cave, one rescuer admitted to lying about reaching him. A man turned up in Kansas claiming to be Collins and saying he'd escaped. This is weird. Why? And in a detail Wilder would definitely put to thematic use, Floyd's own brother embarked on a traveling roadshow sharing the story of the tragedy with customers, naturally paying customers.
Wilder and Newman also drew on a much more recent incident, and one that was closer to Hollywood. The previous year, 3-year-old Kathy Ficus had fallen into a well near Pasadena, California, triggering a massive and massively publicized rescue operation. Workers attempted to reach little Kathy by drilling a well parallel to the first one, and offers of help turned the whole thing into a circus. The massive operation included a bunch of donated heavy equipment, Klieg lights shared by Hollywood studios, and an army of volunteers to go into the well that included jockeys, celebrity little people, and a contingent of tiny clowns from Ringling Brothers. But when they finally reached the trapped girl, she was already dead, and that show was over too.
2 months after finishing their treatment on May 31st, 1950, Wilder and Newman had a partial first draft. And get this, it began with a talking corpse. If you listen to our episode on Sunset Boulevard, you know the version of that film that previewed in Evanston, Illinois, opened with Joe Gillis discussing his sorry fate with other cadavers in a morgue. But audiences laughed, the scene was cut, and the footage was lost to history. But Wilder, for whatever reason, wasn't ready to give up just yet. In the opening to the script that would become Ace in the Hole, journalist Chuck Tatum is already dead, his body sealed in a coffin being wheeled to a train. Here's the corpse's voiceover. Basically, he's telling you he's a shitheel before the movie even starts. Goodbye, Mr. Boot. So long, Herbie. Thanks for seeing me off. I always wanted to go back. Oh, I never figured on the baggage car. There's one more thing I want you to do for me. When you write the obituary, lay it on the line. All you got on me. What I wanted and how bad I wanted it, put that in. What I did to get it, that goes into friendship, pity, conscience. Don't let any of those things stop you. I never let them stop me. Not me, Chuck Tatum. Not since the very first day I hit this godforsaken town of yours, remember.
Maybe we can say Wilder even predicted the beginning of White Lotus. I mean, I think the first season of White Lotus opened with a casket being put on a plane.
I believe so. I think so. I think it's a mystery as to who it is.
Yeah, right. You know somebody's dead, who it is, but yeah. At any rate.
Anyway, yeah.
Wilder was truly a man ahead of his time.
He was. That's absolutely true. And for better or worse, going back to the scene, it never was even shot, so it's not like the footage is lost. It didn't even appear in the final script.
And neither did a stinger he intended to appear before the title, but we'll try to remember to get to that. I find this whole thing so fascinating for what it says about Wilder's pride, or his stubbornness, or his compulsiveness, or even just his psychological makeup. Going into this season, in a way, I guess I saw Wilder as kind of a golden age Steven Soderbergh, in that he was an unflashy director who adapted his style to suit his subject. And there's some truth to that, but there are other directors who fit that better. Because as we're learning about Wilder, and as we'll discuss more fully later in this episode, he really did have some ways in which he put his personal stamp on every movie he directed. And this morbidity is one of them.
Absolutely. Certainly his upbringing in Europe and fleeing from the Nazis stamped his psyche in indelible ways. Coming into the season, I had an image of Wilder as the fun rom-com guy, the one who would go on to inspire, Cameron Crowe and essentially create the dramedy. And once in a while, he'd duck out to make movies like Double Indemnity or Ace in the Hole. But the thing is, those dark movies aren't the exception. They are Wilder's norm, not the other way around. He's a man harboring a lot of darkness, and this is his darkest film yet. Not only that, but according to biographer Ed Sykoff, it was his most personal film to date. Right, Sykoff? Ace in the Hole would not be relieved by light comedy. It would, instead, reveal American culture as the shithole Wilder saw it to be. Keir, my man, just imagine the movies Wilder would make today.
Listeners, the best way you can thank us for the work we do on the Filmographers podcast is to join our Patreon community as a paying member. You'll have access to absolutely everything we do, and it will make you feel good, I promise. But there's also another way you can say thanks that costs absolutely nothing. Write a quick review.
Writing a review of the Filmographers only takes a few minutes of your time and is perhaps the best way to help us find new listeners who will also enjoy the show. Be like CJ3721, who took the time to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, writing, quote, "There are so many movie podcasts around, but this one has carved their own lane. Highly recommended," end quote. I love that. Thanks, CJ.
And be like Matizi23, who also gave us 5 stars and wrote, "Just listen to the Double Indemnity episode. I'm watching the Wilder films with them. I really enjoy their insight and research that goes into each episode to give the listener the history surrounding each film." Oh, thank you, Matizi. We appreciate you too.
As an added incentive to anyone who just hasn't gotten around to writing their review of the Filmographers podcast, in the month of February, we're going to randomly choose one lucky reviewer and send them an amazing gift, a Criterion Blu-ray of Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole, the movie we're talking about today. All you have to do to enter is write a new review of the Filmographers on Apple Podcasts and email a screenshot of your review to us at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com with the subject line, Ace in the Hole.
Want that Blu-ray? Hit pause and do it right now. We don't get a lot of reviews, even with incentives, so your odds of winning are excellent. Screenshot your review and email it to thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com with the subject line, Ace in the Hole. We'll announce the winner in early March.
What'd you have? Pair of deuces? This is better. Here we've got an ace in the hole.
Wilder only wanted one actor for the part of fallen journalist Jack Tatum, a tough Jew whose birth name was Isser Danielovich, and who renamed himself Isidore Dembski before settling on the iconic moniker we all know today, Kirk Douglas. Douglas was a tough guy both on screen and off. He had been a wrestler before he became an actor and performed on Broadway before becoming a bona fide movie star in the 1949 boxing drama Champion. He was in demand and he wanted the part, but he was under contract to Warner Brothers, who didn't want to let him go to Paramount. He was only released to work with Wilder after his lawyers fought with Warner's to pry him loose. He would be paid $150,000, good money back then, but less than $2 million in today's dollars.
And tough as he was, even Douglas urged Wilder to soften the character of Tatum and to give him more of a relationship with the people around him. But Wilder wasn't having it. Using a wrestling idiom, he told Douglas to give it both knees right from the beginning.
This is a recurring theme, as we'll find out. Actors saying, please make my character more likable, and Wilder saying, no.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And maybe even using interesting idioms.
That as well. Opposite Wilder in the role of Lorraine Minosa, the trapped man's hard-bitten, miserable wife, would be Jan Sterling. Sterling had been trained in London, presumably doing a little bit of Shakespeare, but in her early roles had specialized in low-class characters. One of her most recent parts had been playing someone called Smoochie in the women in prison flick Caged. Working with Wilder was a big break for her, at least in terms of resume. Her pay was less than $12,000.
I also like how you're like, oh, I don't know this woman's prison movie. Okay, Keir. What is it?
Never heard of it.
Wilder fans will recognize 2 actors from Double Indemnity. Jacob Boot, Tatum's new boss, is played by Porter Hall, who was also Mr. Jackson, the Medford man, at the rear of the train in Double Indemnity. And Nagel, the New York editor Tatum blackmails to get his job back at the end of the movie, played Norton, the bloviating boss of Pacific All Risk Insurance in Double Indemnity.
Pacific All Risk makes a comeback too. Alf Federber, the tourist who brings his family to gawk at Leo Minosa's plight, plugs them as his employer when he's interviewed on the radio.
Wilder shared universe, the WCU. Wilder's reliable editor, Doan Harrison, would once again work both on set and in post-production, and Charles Lang, who shot Wilder's A Foreign Fair, would work with him again as cinematographer. For the score, Wilder turned to Hugo Friedhofer, a busy composer who he had not worked with before.
As for the producer, well, there was another reason this picture would represent Wilder with the brakes off. The producer was none other than Billy Wilder. And Billy Wilder, the producer, gave Billy Wilder, the director, permission to go for broke.
Keir, longtime listeners know that when you're not podcasting, you're a prolific author. Last year, you came out with 2 books, and you already have another one on the way.
That's right, Mike. On March 3rd, I Did Not Kill My Husband will go on sale. It's the 5th book I've written with my writing partner, Linda Jaffe Hull, under the pen name Linda Keir.
I Did Not Kill My Husband. That title sounds strangely familiar.
It should. It's an inversion of Richard Kimball's famous line in The Fugitive as he tries to find the one-armed man who killed his beloved wife. Our book is a thriller that pays homage to Andrew Davis's modern classic. Only our wrongly accused protagonist is a social media influencer whose platform is all about what she calls ethical gold digging. And since she already admitted she married her husband for his money, no one believes she didn't kill him to cash out his insurance policy.
So no train crash, no one-armed man, no Tommy Lee Jones?
Nope. But I have no doubt film fans will enjoy the way we tip our hats to those famous story elements.
I can't wait to read it, unless they make it into a movie. Then I can just watch it.
From your mouth to Hollywood's ears, Mike. In the meantime, listeners, you can pre-order I Did Not Kill My Husband wherever books are sold. If you want a signed copy, order it from the Filmographers' favorite bookstore, Exile in Bookville. Visit exileinbookville.com. As was now typical for a Billy Wilder picture, the movie that would be called Ace in the Hole went into pre-production without a completed script. But with 3 screenwriters on the job and Wilder's track record of success, I'm guessing no one was very concerned.
Who's going to tell Billy Wilder he's running behind? Billy Wilder?
Good point. He had a very understanding producer. Makeup and wardrobe tests began in late June, and by early July, they had a near final script, even if it didn't yet include a few now classic lines like "Kneeling bags my nylons," which would be contributed by Wilder's wife, Audrey. The Production Code Administration weighed in on what they had read and complained that there wasn't a, quote, proper voice for morality at the end. But the PCA had lost a lot of its power in post-war America, and as Wilder prepared his most venomous film yet, the PCA didn't put up much of a fight. Wilder made a minor change, suggesting the crooked sheriff might someday be exposed, and moved on.
Cameras started rolling on July 10 in Albuquerque, then a very sleepy town, to shoot the street scenes. Or as Chuck Tatum says, even for Albuquerque, this is pretty Albuquerque. We're giving Wilder a lot of credit for being ahead of his time, so let's go ahead and give him credit for bringing a morally complex antihero to Albuquerque 6 decades before Breaking Bad. So take that, Vince Gilligan. We love you, Vince Gilligan.
Yeah, but take that.
Take that.
The next day, production moved to Gallup, New Mexico, standing in for Escudero, New Mexico, where they would film exteriors for the Minosas trading post, the mountain where the hapless Leo gets buried alive, and the carnival that takes over the parking lot. Wilder had shot films on location before, of course, including Five Graves to Cairo and The Emperor Waltz, but this location shoot was his biggest one yet. 1/10 of the $1.5 million budget had been allocated to this part of the shoot.
Big crowd scenes were key to Wilder's vision for the film, but he was also savvy enough to know they wouldn't have to hire the 550 extras they needed. In a case of life imitating art, the spectacle of the film shoot itself drew its own crowd. As filming went on, the crowd of gawkers kept growing. By July 16, there were more than 600 extras on hand, not all of them paid. By Saturday, July 22nd, there were more than 1,000 extras and over 400 cars, making the crowd scenes truly epic.
Wilder was making a big statement, and he had a big canvas on which to do it. The scale was simply breathtaking. Paramount's PR Flax claimed the Ace in the Hole set was the largest set ever constructed for what wasn't a war movie.
A decade later, Joe Mankiewicz made Cleopatra and said, "Hold my beer." But then he had to take his beer back because he had to drink and medicate his way through that epically terrible production.
There's a lot of roasting going on in this episode.
Thank God none of these people are alive. Oh no, Vince Gilligan is.
Oh, shit. Sorry. The set was 235 feet high, 1,200 feet across, and 1,600 feet deep, and included roadside stands, a cliff, a parking lot, and of course, a carnival. Remember that word, carnival. Now, as with The Emperor Waltz, shot in the Canadian Rockies near Banff, Mother Nature played an unpredictable role. Production was repeatedly delayed by what seemed like an unusual amount of clouds and rain. At one point, they discovered meteorologists were conducting cloud seeding experiments in the area, which seems like a comic twist from a Billy Wilder movie.
Even with the delays, they managed to wrap the location shoot on August 2nd, only 5 days behind schedule, and then returned to shoot interiors on the Paramount lot. Wilder and his collaborators continued working on the script in the evenings, and by September 5th, they had finally finished it, 6 whole days before the production wrapped on September 11th.
More and more, this would become Wilder's working pattern. While he insisted that actors deliver their lines exactly as written, making him very much a spiritual forebear of the Coen brothers, he would continue developing the script while he shot the movie, often tweaking things depending on the performances he was getting or new ideas that occurred to him. But according to Jan Sterling, who played Lorraine Minosa, quote, he didn't direct. He never said a little more of this or a little more of that. He used the camera as his instrument of direction. He knew what he wanted to show and what he wanted to see. He never stopped and said, no, that's not right, let's do it again. He just uses your own personality and the camera, end quote. It's a fascinating little insight into his working method. He was not a tyrant director. And in this, maybe he is a little bit like our man Soderbergh, the subject of our first season, a synthesist.
The most memorable story from the shoot is a scene when Douglas got a little too into character. Tatum's self-contempt causes him to become crueler and crueler to Lorraine, and when the dying Leo tells Tatum to give Lorraine the anniversary gift he's hidden away, Chuck does it. The present is a ratty fur stole, and Lorraine makes fun of it, saying, "Gorgeous, isn't it? He must have skinned a couple of hungry rats." She throws it on the floor, but Chuck picks it up and angrily forces her to wear it, then chokes her with it. In desperation, she stabs him with the scissors she used to cut the ribbon. When the take was over, Sterling gasped for breath, and Douglas realized with horror what he had done. "Good God, Jan, if I was squeezing you too hard, why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. She replied, "I couldn't. You were choking me."
Here's the story, fans. Chuck Tatum is a newspaperman who's been fired from a dozen big city newspapers for drinking, womanizing, and libel. After his car breaks down outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, he gets towed into town and demands a job at the Sun Bulletin newspaper.
Mr. Boot, I'm a $250 a week newspaper man. I can be had for $50.
Why are you so good to me?
I know newspapers backward, forward, and sideways. I can write them, edit them, print them, wrap them, and sell them.
Don't need anybody right now.
I can handle big news and little news. And if there's no news, I'll go out and bite a dog.
He's a city slicker with nothing but contempt for these local hits, and 1 year later, absolutely nothing has changed. Sent to cover a rattlesnake hunt with cub photographer Herbie, he stumbles across a tragedy in progress. Leo Minosa, proprietor of a trading post, has been pillaging Indian artifacts from a burial ground and is now trapped by a cave-in.
Sensing a story, Tatum grabs Herbie's camera and works his way into the cave, where he snaps a picture, then files a story and unleashes an entertainment spectacle personified by the Federber family, some dopey tourists who have read the first headlines and brought their kids because they claim it will be instructive.
Leo's wife, Lorraine, has never been happy at the 2-bit trading post because Leo lured her there with false claims of his successful business. She sees his entrapment as her chance to escape and is headed for the bus when Tatum stops her. He needs a grieving spouse for his story. Telling her the store is about to do booming business, he strong-arms her into staying, effectively trapping her a second time.
Tatum stage manages Lorraine while directing the rescue operation, while slowly corrupting wide-eyed young Herbie. And after the story really goes national, he outmaneuvers his competition from the bigger papers with help from the crooked local sheriff, who he promises to help re-elect.
But Tatum is not just covering the story, he's manufacturing it. Because he has bullied the rescue team into drilling into the collapsed cliff dwelling from the top of the mountain instead of shoring up the original passageway, this buys him time to build up the story and to blackmail his old paper into hiring him back. But his success comes at a terrible cost. Leo doesn't make it.
Tatum's self-contempt is clear, but it comes too late for Leo and himself. Dying from the stab wound from Lorraine's scissors, he gets a priest to perform last rites for Leo. Then he tries to engineer his own confession by telling Herbie to tell the real story of what he's done. But he doesn't get to make his final confession. He dies on the newsroom floor in what is probably the most bravura shot of Wilder's career.
First boot.
Yes, Chuck.
How'd you like to make yourself $1,000 a day, Mr. Boot? I'm a $1,000 a day newspaper man. You can have me for nothing.
Mike, we both agree this is a terrific film, one of Wilder's best. So instead of singing its praises, I want to talk about a few big topics. And for the first one, I'm going to turn around the question you asked me last episode when we were discussing Sunset Boulevard, and you asked me if it was a personal movie. I started this season believing Wilder was not much of a personal filmmaker, but now I'm realizing he is. He's just more subtle about it than a lot of directors. So proceeding from the assumption that Ace in the Hole is a personal movie, Mike, how is it personal?
I was listening to a podcast recently, The Big Picture, and they're talking about Lumet, and they're talking about how Lumet spent his career going out of his way to show people that he wasn't a God figure, as most directors will go out of their way to be a God figure. Yeah. You know, he's movies and his working method are to strip his ego completely, serve the story, serve the job, and that's what he does. Wilder similarly goes out of his way to prove that none of his movies are personal. You know, he'll maybe dabble and say, well, this is kind of a personal movie, and he'll kind of hint at it in interviews, although, you know, we don't have a terrible amount of them, especially recorded interviews. But he has gone on record a lot saying that his movies, for the most part, are not personal. And yet every movie we watch, we find a personal connection to them.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think that we said it earlier when we were talking about him trying to portray basically what a shithole America is. Yeah. And I think that's really honest of him. I think that, you know, he came out of Weimar, Germany, which was this cradle of art and artists. And, you know, it was very progressive in terms of its sexual politics. There's so much more liberalism in that pocket of German history that was ahead of America, still ahead of America, you know, by like 20 years, you know, and there's probably some longing for him of the, you know, life and locations he left behind. I mean, tragically, because he was on the run from the Nazis. But I think that he does see American culture as kind of trash, you know, and shit, he's not wrong, you know, like he's not. And I think that's part of like his anger a little bit.
It's interesting too, because I think if you asked him, he would say that he didn't like fighting with censors and he didn't like the small-mindedness. And yet I think that conflict was so key to his art and his personality. He did relish those fights. And as we've talked about before, both on the podcast and off the podcast, you know, so much of the struggle is what makes good art, right? Like constraints and limitations, having to work within constraints and limitations are things that make movies better. So I think certainly you could argue that his battles with the censors, particularly in his earlier films, created some really just dynamic, electric movies. And maybe his very disdain for American culture too fueled some of his greatest statements, as this certainly is.
One thing, like I said, that's at the top of the show, I had an image of Wilder, and I think a lot of people have that image of Wilder as, you know, seen through the lens of Some Like It Hot, and The Apartment, and things like that. And Wilder is a pretty angry guy. I think it's safe to say. I don't think he was an unhappy guy, but I think he was a very angry guy. He had a lot of reason to be. We've gone through his biography. I already said, you know, he had to flee his country, flee his family, flee multiple times. And he didn't like fighting with the censors. He didn't like having to flee for this, you know, in comparison, you know, conservative backdrop. We're getting into the time of blacklisting and things like that in Hollywood. So there's things that he is very opposed to and very angry about. He's working with Brackett all the time, who's like kind of a representative of all the things that he's angry about. And he's dealing with all these things, and I think they just naturally come out of his movie. I mean, in his movies, you know, Ace in the Hole is an angry movie. It's a dark movie, but I think more than that is that it's a cruel and angry movie. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think it might be my favorite Wilder. I mean, you can look at also, like, you know, Tatum is a journalist. Wilder has a history as a journalist. And I think there's something there as well. But I think what we're seeing here, especially in context of Wilder being unleashed for the first time, is a lot of his anger.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't put as much in the journalism as a lot of writers do. Many people, I think there's just this easy equation, like we've read and are reading, you know, all the biographies of Wilder, and most of them sort of, in talking about Ace in the Hole, point to the fact that he was a journalist, and so that makes Tatum his surrogate. Tatum may be a surrogate in other ways. I don't think Wilder loved to tell stories about his journalistic career, but as we know, most of those stories were made up. It was a very brief period in his life. I don't think he identified throughout life as, I'm a former journalist. I think it was just one of the things he did.
I agree.
Sykov, the biographer who we quote most often, even though, again, we read them all, he kind of gets into somewhat new territory by saying that, like, Tatum's attitude towards women reflects Wilder's own, and that Wilder is somebody who very much loved women, was very attracted to women. Obviously, we've gone into detail about how he's a philanderer. He was a cheater. He was a rogue. But he also, there was something maybe in his personality that was kind of repulsed by women. I think I agree with the first part more than the second part. But I do think that with men like that, I think men who are cheaters like that, I think there is a simultaneous attraction and repulsion. I mean, what do you think about that?
I feel like it's consistent across all genders. I think that he is a bit he's less of a misogynist and more of a misanthrope, to be honest. I mean, he treats people like shit. Like, we love Wilder, and he's funny and he's charming, but, you know, I don't want to give anything away, but when we get to Stalag 17, he continues his trend of finding new writers to work with, and they're writers he straight up abuses.
Yeah.
And that is indicative of, again, the anger, but just as a guy, you know, he does it in a colorful way, but still the fact that he does it kind of conveys the fact that he's just a guy who doesn't really love people. And his people that are populate his movies are not really likable, good people. They're scheming. They're stealing, they're killing. We can talk a lot, and I'm sure we will later, and especially in Stalag 17 and Masquerade, they're always pretending to be something that they're not, whether to survive or to, you know, rob somebody, fleece somebody, con somebody. There is a lot going on that doesn't say, I'm a people person.
Yeah, for sure. Well, maybe like bringing the personal aspect full circle too. You know, there's the point that's been made by several writers that, you know, perhaps on some subconscious level, Leo's plight, he's imprisoned. Mm-hmm. He is trapped. That might be symbolic of Jews in concentration camps, and that, you know, there's some anger Wilder's working out about the world's response to that. You know, I don't know that it tracks one-to-one, because, you know, it's not like that was used for an entertainment spectacle, but certainly there was, like, if you go more broadly, there's human suffering. There's an indifferent world.
I don't know. See, that one, I don't know that I'm curious your thoughts. I don't buy it. Yeah. Because I think if he feels trapped anywhere, I feel like he's trapped in Hollywood.
Yeah.
I mean, he clearly, as you said earlier in the show, he knows he's a genius. He knows that he can just dance circles around everybody. He doesn't have a peer. I would argue Brackett was kind of his peer as a writer.
Yeah.
But in terms of a creative force, Wilder doesn't have a peer. And here he is having to compromise a lot and fight with studios and fight with the Hays Co's. And he can't go back home. You know, there is no real industry in Europe to go home to. It's just, you know, it's in tatters for post-war. Like, he's trapped in Hollywood. This is the best version of the fantasy, and I don't think he loves it. You know, he wouldn't have made Sunset Boulevard if he did. But I don't know. Do you see that, the concentration camp thing?
I think it's not as strong as some of these other ideas. And I mean, we'll talk in a moment about some of the other kind of recurring motifs of Wilder's films and the things that feel kind of like personal across all of his movies. I thought that was an interesting idea when I came across it. I think on some emotional, visceral level, it kind of works, but I'm not sure it holds up to long-lasting scrutiny.
We've butted up against that one before. I forget what the movie it was. It was like Wilder's working out his, you know, concentration camp stuff. And maybe he is, but I don't, you know, his mom did die, although now I've read that reports are conflicting. She may have died somewhere else. He discovered later, but like still, at least at this time, his working knowledge is that his mom died in a concentration camp or a work camp. I forget.
Yeah, no, she did. It was a different camp than he understood it to be, but it's you know, effectively the same sad thing. I mean, it's funny. I mean, I think the metaphor actually holds up more strongly in The Emperor Waltz, the Bing Crosby vehicle that we both despise, because those speeches are much more on the nose, you know, about these mongrel dogs who are going to be exterminated. So, yeah.
Yeah.
For all that's movie's faults, maybe it's a clearer glimpse into the Wilder's psyche.
Rich in metaphor, The Emperor Waltz.
And we'll be talking about Bing again soon enough.
Bing.
I also wanted to talk about Wilder as a visual stylist because he always claimed he didn't like flashy camera work. And because he repeated that in so many interviews, film historians, you know, took him at his word and have more or less accepted the idea that Wilder wasn't much of a visual stylist. And, you know, yes, it's true that he never moved the camera just for the sake of moving the camera. But Ace in the Hole has striking images that prove how underrated he is visually.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I find it interesting, again, the mythologizing he does of himself that says, you know, like, no, I'm not a visual stylist, even though like we're saying, he very much is. And I was like, no, none of my movies are personal, but we find that they are.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, he is a guy who loved his own mythology. Like we say, he is a bullshitter. Like, he straight up fabricates so many stories of his life and his youth. And it's interesting what he chooses to fabricate, or not fabricate, but what he chooses to accept and, you know, promote of himself, and what he downplays. And there's something, you know, even deeper psychological about that.
You can accuse me of quite a few bad pictures, but you can accuse me of very, very few low angle shots. Yeah, a low angle and kind of where it's the cinematic, you know. Yes. In a shot like this, there's this constant orgasm there. Oh, look at me and passive little spittoon that's in the foreground. Here, get there. Shoot the son of a bitch and let's go home.
But getting back to Ace, I'm going to talk about, there's a shot early in the film when Tatum walks toward the camera, obscuring our view, and when he walks away again, a year has passed. It's one of the great time jumps in film history, the side of an ape throwing a bone into outer space.
Yes.
And Keir, I don't know if you noticed this, by this time, he's become a belt and suspenders man.
I didn't notice that until somebody pointed it out to me, but it's so great.
It's so great.
It's a funny joke.
He is becoming, you know, the yokel as himself, you know? Yeah. There are also his epic shots of the massive and growing crowd. He even has a helicopter shot, which I imagine was pretty rare in that era of filmmaking.
Yeah.
You know, one of the most memorable shots shows the arrival of the Leo Minosa special, a train bringing still more people to the site. Riders leap off the train and literally run across the fields toward the mountain in their fervor to be part of what's happening. Honestly, it reminds me of a shot from Lawrence of Arabia, but in reverse, and about a decade earlier. Finally, there's a shot literally showing the downfall of Tatum. When he dies at the end, he falls into a low-angle shot and lands in a close-up, a shot so remarkable and influential that Spike Lee quoted it in Malcolm X.
Fun fact, Spike Lee really wanted to remake Ace in the Hole during the 1990s. I'm glad he didn't, because you should never remake a masterpiece. But it definitely would have been interesting.
I've heard Spike Lee talk about Billy Wilder a lot. He's a very big fan. And I think you see a lot of Wilder in Spike Lee.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk about some recurring themes and motifs in Wilder's work. This is his 8th film, so we're now 1/3 of the way through his filmography. And even though he's made several different kinds of movies, by now we're seeing some of his obsessions emerge. First, one of the most enduring tropes in a Wilder film, as you alluded to earlier, is of a character who pretends to be someone else. This is something we find in almost every picture, whether in large ways or small. In The Major and the Minor, it's obvious. Susan Applegate pretends to be a kid, which sets the stage for everything else that happens. In Five Graves to Cairo, Bramble, a British soldier, pretends to be Davos, a waiter, without realizing that Davos was only pretending to be a waiter too. In Double Indemnity, Neff pretends to be Mr. Dietrichson, the man he has just killed.
And we'll see this idea of false identities and masquerades pop up in a major way in our upcoming episode on Stalag 17.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Emperor Waltz, which we've also talked about already, is maybe the hardest one to fit in. And I know we'd like to both strike this Bing Crosby vehicle from Billy Wilder's filmography, but we have to reckon with it, Mike. Because it is about class and the failure to belong, it very loosely fits into a theme of either Virgil or Johanna having to pretend to be something other than what they are in order to rise or lower themselves into each other's class.
I mean, loosely, but very loosely, but you're onto something.
I may be reaching. In A Foreign Affair, Pringle pretends to be an upright serviceman to help Congresswoman Frost investigate a man who is actually him.
Yeah.
In Sunset Boulevard, Gillis uneasily takes the role of Desmond's rent boy, but more importantly, Max von Mayerling pretends to be only her loyal butler, when in reality, he was her first husband and best director.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good one. And in Ace in the Hole, maybe one of the most twisted masquerades, Tatum pretends to be Leo's friend and helper, while in reality, he's slowly killing him. This is such a key to unlocking not only Wilder's movies, but Wilder the man. Although we know he had an outsized personality and an ego to match, during his Hollywood career, he was also always an outsider, an immigrant, an exile, an Eastern European Jew whose difference would forever be marked by his heavy Austrian accent. Now, there was a big and brilliant community of Jewish emigres in Hollywood, and many people have written about their role in shaping popular American culture, but the truth is that anti-Semitism, then and now, has always meant that they were not fully embraced. There's a reason Isser Danielovich changed his name to Kirk Douglas. There's a reason, sadly, many Jewish stars continue to change their names in the decades that followed.
I think another fascinating development we're starting to see is that Wilder was one of the original filmmakers to play with genre. Some of his earlier films seem easy to categorize. Major and the Minor is a romantic comedy, Five Graves is a war picture, Double Indemnity is film noir. Lost Weekend feels like a noir in some ways, but the only crime Burnham commits is against himself. Emperor Waltz looks like a musical, but it's really just a comedy with a few songs.
Yeah, A Foreign Affair is where it gets really interesting. It's a romantic comedy, but its setting, the ruins of post-war Berlin and the hunt for Nazi war criminals, has to be some kind of first.
Yeah, for sure. Sunset Boulevard is a movie about Hollywood, but it's also a film noir framed by a talking corpse.
Yeah, and Ace in a Hole, I mean, what is it? It's a movie about a journalist, which is almost a subgenre of its own, but it lands with noir heaviness.
Yeah, I agree. Now, noir authority Eddie Muller disagrees, but I, respectfully disagree with Eddie Muller. I feel like it's almost a daylight noir. It's got a protagonist who dooms himself by committing a crime. The system isn't rigged against him, as in many noirs, but it's almost like he misunderstands the whole system or something.
Ace in the Hole is, again, one of those films that sort of gets honorary noir status because it's Billy Wilder. And of course, he did Double Indemnity and Sunset Boulevard. And because Ace in the Hole is more cynical than both of those films put together, it's very tempting to call it a film noir. But of course, it takes place in broad daylight out in New Mexico, and it's really more a movie about, sleazy journalism than it is about any of the typical stuff you find in a film noir. So even though I write about it at length in my books, in the context of Billy Wilder and newspaper movies and all of that, I don't really consider it to be a film noir. Certainly not in a league with Double Indemnity or Sunset Boulevard.
I wonder what he would think. Have you seen Bad Day at Black Rock? What is it? Yeah, Bad Day at Black Rock. The Spencer Tracy.
Oh, yeah.
That's a noir, right? That's a daylight noir.
I mean, I think so. Everybody's got their own definition of noir.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's like the fated hero, the femme fatale. Often it's somebody being kind of crushed by, society or a machine of some sort, whether it's a criminal enterprise or politics or something that, that they have no chance of ever beating.
Yeah.
But like, to me, it's kind of one of those things, like if it satisfies 3 out of 4 or 2 out of 3, like, it's noir. I mean, I think certainly, Ace is a spiritual noir.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. But I think what we need to do is get Eddie on the show.
Yeah, Eddie, if you're listening,
he comes to town every year for Noir City.
Come on the show and correct us.
Yeah, hey, I'll take it.
Yeah,
yeah, Noir City every August. He's in Chicago.
Oh, I know. The music box. Okay, we're gonna waylay him with microphones. Jack Schaefer of Slate. Jack Schaefer maybe known more for his political commentary than his film commentary, but he wrote of Ace in the Hole, quote, "If film noir illustrates the crack up of the American dream, Ace in the Hole is an exemplar of the form," end quote. I like that. There are also small Wilder touches that keep recurring in different movies. He seems obsessed with matches. In Double Indemnity, Neff lights Key's cigars by striking matches with his thumbnail. In Ace in the Hole, Tatum memorably lights a match by letting the movement of the typewriter carriage do the work. Fantastic little bit. And in our next episode, well, there's a terrific match striking scene in Stalag 17 where Sefton strikes a match on a fellow POW's sergeant stripes.
Wilder worked with Howard Hawks on Ball of Fire. He was also obsessed with matches.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, one of the best is Scarface. He keeps lighting the match on the cop.
Maybe the truth is that Billy Wilder is a pyromaniac.
Maybe. Well, they did make the movie Ball of Fire.
Case closed.
All right. Getting back to Masquerade, there's a drag scene in Stalag 17, not to mention an extended dance sequence that foreshadows Some Like It Hot, not to mention a ton of homosexual undertones. Wilder wasn't the first straight director to mind cross-dressing for humor, but he was the best of all time. Keir, if someone's coming to Chicago, what's one place they have to visit?
Mike, no one should leave town without stopping by Exile in Bookville, the city's most beautiful and carefully curated bookstore. It's located on the second floor of the historic Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue.
Hey, didn't you write a book about the Fine Arts Building?
Why, yes, I did. It's called Chicago's Fine Arts Building, Music, Magic, and Murder, and you can find it at Exile.
Exile is the best. Wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling books, all lovingly selected by owners Javier and Kristen Ramirez. I guarantee you'll find something to read.
Their strong suit may be general and literary fiction, but I particularly love the middle room. That's where I find graphic novels as well as books about art and music, cooking and cocktails, and our personal favorite, books about movies.
Javier and Kristen were kind enough to let the Filmographers recommend our favorites, so stop by and see what we selected.
I wrote a shelf talker for one of my all-time favorites, Kyle Buchanan's Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, the wild and true story of Mad Max Fury Road.
They also stocked one of my faves, Sam Wasson's The Big Goodbye, Chinatown, and the Last Years of Hollywood.
Exile also has nonfiction, short stories, small press titles, and the very best in modern horror.
Listeners, if you're coming to Chicago, don't leave without visiting Exile in Bookville in the Fine Arts Building at 410 South Michigan Avenue. But you don't have to come to Chicago. You can find all they have to offer at exileinbookville.com.
Because there's more to life than movies. There are also books.
About movies.
Ace in the Hole was a Billy Wilder production from start to finish. He oversaw the writing, he directed it, he produced it. It was his vision all the way. Mike, after it was released in May 1951, how did it do?
Not well, Keir.
Damn it.
Its final cost was $1.8 million, which wouldn't have been a problem if it had been the hit the studio was anticipating. But audiences, even audiences who loved the caustic Sunset Boulevard, were unprepared for the bleakness of Ace in the Hole. It earned $1.3 million in rental, which, when you factor in the cost of film prints and marketing, means it lost Paramount a lot of money. Hollywood Reporter's take sums up the critical response. Quote, "Ruthless and cynical, Ace in the Hole is a distorted story of corruption and mob psychology that, in this reviewer's opinion, is nothing more than a brazen, uncalled for slap in the face to two respected and frequently effective American institutions, democratic government and the free press." I don't see the problem, but they added that the film, quote, "proceeds on the premise that Americans are a bunch of dopes, easily duped, victims of mass hysteria, and emotionally placated by vicarious experience." Again, not seeing the problem, not seeing the lack of reality here.
It sounds like someone took it personally, but it's important to remember that film critics then, I would say more than now, because there were newspapers then and there barely are now, but film critics considered themselves to be newspapermen, and so they felt very personally attacked.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Wilder didn't even get the title he wanted. At the very last minute, a panicking Paramount executive changed the title to The Big Carnival, a name that stuck until TCM rebroadcast it many years later and Criterion's 2007 release.
The film was better received in Europe, where audiences, either because they were more sophisticated or because they were ready for a jaded view of America, I'm betting on the latter, they liked it. It even won an international award at the Venice Film Festival. But did Hollywood care what they thought at the Venice Film Festival? They did not.
If Tatum was Wilder's surrogate, now both of them were braggadocious big shots who failed. And even though Wilder would go on to great success, his career would never be the same. Paramount could forgive him for making one flop, but he couldn't forgive himself. After Ace in the Hole, Wilder showed that his rebellious instinct only went so far. He started to play it safe. Many years later, after he had stopped directing, he told Cameron Crowe, "It was just, I don't know. I just changed my mind about the audience. I just think that if you do something very fine, they will get to the core of the thing, what it's about, what it's really about." But they never, at the time, they never gave it a chance. Somebody in an editorial, I think, in Life magazine said that, quote, "Mr. Wilder should be deported." I felt that I was not with it anymore, that I wrote against the audience, the people who paid, in those days, $1.50, $2. They felt robbed. They wanted to be entertained in a serious way, but not too serious a way.
He may have wanted to challenge audiences, but he also wanted to keep making movies. While filming Ace, he told the LA Times, "I always make things very tough on myself by not going out and buying a successful stage play or novel, but starting instead from scratch." But after Ace flopped, he reversed course. His next 3 films were adaptations of successful Broadway plays. The 4th was based on a best-selling biography, and the 5th, 6th, and 7th were adaptations of other people's work. Not until 1960 would he dare to make another original story. But that one was another one of his very best, The Apartment.
Sadly, Wilder died in 2002, just before his masterpiece was rediscovered. There's a complicated timeline that I haven't got it all quite down, but basically, shortly after his death, it was honored as a forgotten film in some retrospective, and then bits and pieces, it started kind of coming back again a little bit, and then TCM showed it, which is how I first saw it, and then in 2007, Criterion released a DVD, which prompted a wave of official reappraisals because people re-reviewed it, and none of them were more prominent or important than Roger Ebert's, whose 4-star review is a must-read.
Roger, we love you.
I'm going to quote briefly from Ebert's review. "Wilder, born in Austria, a refugee from Hitler, certainly became one of America's greatest directors, but he never bought into the American dream. What he saw in Europe warned him off dreams. Although Ace in the Hole has always been considered one of his greatest films, its rejection by the marketplace isn't surprising. Moviegoers like crime, like suspense, like violence, but they like happy endings, and Wilder is telling them to wake up and smell the coffee.
And that fantastic Criterion edition is still in print, and we're giving it away this month. Remember, if you leave us a review and send us an email with the subject line Ace in the Hole to the Filmographers Podcast at gmail.com. Now, you can also stream Ace in the Hole on Prime. While some of Wilder's lesser films can be hard to track down, this one is not. I know some listeners are not watching every Wilder film this season, and fair enough. No need to revisit The Emperor Waltz. You can't find it anyway, so you're in luck. But if you, oh no, you can. It's Kino Lorber as the disc. Yeah, you can't find it streaming. Yeah, it's nowhere streaming. But if you haven't seen Ace in the Hole, do it. It is essential Wilder.
No question. Yeah, it's people's rankings may vary, but it is among his very, very best.
The thing is this, that having been at it for a long time, I don't delude myself. Usually, when a picture doesn't work, you go around and you say, it was ahead of its time. The release was too close to Christmas. The release of the picture was too close after Christmas because people had spent their money on presents for Christmas. The picture is a failure, because there was so much sun and people wanted to go to the beach, and then it was a failure because it rained and nobody is on the streets. All kinds of excuses. The excuse in this picture must be, I think that I chose a subject, again, the one split second when you decide what to do, and apparently it was the wrong picture for the time, and I just think that it, in a way, it affronted the people who saw the picture. They thought that they don't like to be confronted with things that are true and hurt. They say, well, I don't want to spend now $8 for Saturday night, but going to see the movie at night and be told that I'm a son of a bitch and that we are bad people.
Izzy Diamond, Wilder's longest-running collaborator, later said of Ace in the Hole, "Sure, they called it cynical. And then you see thousands and thousands of people turning up at Idlewild Airport in New York to watch a plane coming down with bad landing gear. People clog the runway waiting for it to crash. And you ask yourself how cynical Ace in the Hole really was."
We'll give the last word on his legacy to Wilder himself, who years later told biographer Maurice Zolotov, quote, "Fuck them all. It is the best picture I ever made."
Well, it's time to wrap up this episode with our latest Filmographers 5, a list of 5 films somehow related to the film we just discussed. And we've got a terrific list.
We do, but first, if you've enjoyed today's episode and you want to thank Keir and me for all the hard work we put into it, please visit patreon.com/the Filmographers Podcast and join our community right now. Patreon is not only a way you can support us financially, it's the only place where you can find every single thing we share. If you support us at the $5 a month level, we'll send you a mug, and for $2 a month, you'll get a handsome Filmographers sticker.
Not ready to join Patreon? Please, please, please review the show. The best place for the almighty algorithm is Apple Podcasts. And as we've mentioned twice on this show already, and I'll say it one more time, if you review us during the month of February and send us a screenshot at thefilmographerspodcast.com, you will be entered in a drawing for a Criterion DVD of Ace in the Hole. So the stakes will never be the rewards will never be better.
The stakes
will never be higher for us. The rewards for you will never be better.
Do it or else.
But if you don't want to write a review, comment on a YouTube episode, or even on Spotify, every little interaction helps raise our profile and find more listeners. If you've been thinking about doing it, don't put it off any longer. Our fingers are crossed you'll give us 5 stars.
All right. It's time for the Filmographers 5. And this was a tough one because it's a category that is just chock full of classics. Movies about journalists. I know this is one of Keir's favorite genres, and it's one of mine too. Who doesn't love a crusading, fast-talking reporter? And there was so much competition. So many good movies here, but there's only room for 5. So fine films such as The Front Page, remade by Wilder himself, and September 5 are missing from this list. We even left off, what was that movie called? I'm drawing a blank.
The Killing Fields.
The Killing Fields, yes, I knew that was. We left that one off. It was a very hard choice, if you can believe that. Although, maybe it comes up in another list at some point. You never know.
Never know.
Keir, why don't you tell us what is on our list?
Our number 5 favorite movie about journalists is Broadcast News, James L. Brooks' 1987 romantic comedy drama about a love triangle on a TV news team starring Holly Hunter, William Hurt, and Albert Brooks. This isn't nearly as hard-hitting as Ace in the Hole, but it's not meant to be. It is funny and touching and ultimately dispiriting as we watch good looks and bad ethics win out over smarts and substance. There's a reason so many good journalism films are set in the world of TV, because the big screen is a great way to reveal the flaws of the small screen.
Our number 4 favorite movie about journalists is Network, Sidney Lumet's scathing satirical comedy about a news anchor who boosts his struggling show's ratings by having a mental breakdown on air. It's an incredibly prescient take on the slow side of TV news into infotainment and formats that make hot takes and big personalities more important than facts and reporting. And it's one of my personal favorite movies of all time. Top 10.
It makes many a top list.
Yeah, Lumet, man.
Our number 3 favorite movie about journalists is All the President's Men, Alan Pakula's 1976 classic starring Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman as the legendary Washington Post journalists Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who broke the Watergate scandal during the Nixon administration. For pure entertainment, this might be number 1, but it's held back slightly by its dramatically simplistic portrayal of its heroes as mavericks. The next movie on our list earns its place by showing the truly collaborative effort required to make great journalism.
Yes, and that is our number 2 favorite movie about journalists, and it is Spotlight, Tom McCarthy's 2016 Academy Award-winning docudrama about Boston Globe journalists investigating the cover-up of systemic childish sex abuse by Catholic priests. The expertly conducted ensemble cast includes Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Liev Schreiber, John Slattery, and Stanley Tucci, and creates its intense drama through remarkable realism. Adam Pennenberg, the man who brought down discredited journalist Stephen Glass, says, "This isn't just one of the best journalism movies ever made, it's one of the most accurate."
And our number 1 favorite movie about journalists is The Insider, Michael Mann's 1999 masterpiece starring Russell Crowe as Jeffrey Wigand, a real-life tobacco executive who blew the whistle on his own industry, to Al Pacino as Lowell Bergman of 60 Minutes, only to find his testimony discredited and suppressed both by his own employer and CBS. People are mad at CBS for their recent cowardice and have often cited 60 Minutes as a gold standard show, but this riveting film shows the more things change, the more they stay the same.
And Jeffrey Wigand, who's out on a limb, does he go on television and tell the truth? Yes. Is it newsworthy? Yes. Are we going to air it? Of course not. Why? Because he's not telling the truth? No, because he is telling the truth. That's why we're not going to air it. And the more truth he tells, the worse it gets.
And that's it for this episode of the Filmographers podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on our season-long exploration of the films of Billy Wilder.
Have a comment or suggestion? Want to share your take on Ace in the Hole or make a special request? We want to hear from you. Please email us at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you, as always, to our fantastic producer, Kevin Lau, who makes our podcast look and sound as good as it does. Our theme music was composed and played by Gompson, and our graphic design is by Cosmo Graff.
Join us next time when Billy Wilder bounces back with a hit movie that finds laughs in an unlikely place, a Nazi POW camp.